Greetings. I'm going to give you a little demo on a leadership. So you've got a SAC. SAC 1 was to give a presentation on leadership. So I've put together a little PowerPoint and I'm going to talk to you about leadership. So if you use Zoom, as I said, you can get hand actions and you can make a presentation and you can use body language and those sort of things. So here we go. So I've chosen Burnet and Doherty as my two leaders. They're two famous Australian Nobel Prize winning virologists, and they've been recognised on the world stage as leaders. Highly respected, well known if you're into medicine. Okay, so what's something about background? You weren't asked to do background, but how can you talk about a person without knowing something about them? So Sir Frank Macfarlane Burnet was often known as Mac or Macfarlane to distinguish him from his father, who was also called Frank. He lived for 90-something, well, not quite 90, 80-something years. He had his centenary in 1999, and that'll come up later in the presentation. He was happily married with 3 children. He had 2 daughters and a son. He did his Doctor of Medicine at Melbourne Uni, or the University of Melbourne, in 1924, and then he was asked to go overseas because he was a brilliant student, and he did his PhD at the University of London in 1928, or he completed it in 1928. It took him a bit longer to do that. He was a country lad, born and bred in Victoria. From Traralgon, he moved to Port Fairy and Terang, a few other places. He went to 2 primary schools in Victoria, but then he won a scholarship to the prestigious Geelong College, so he went there without paying. And then he won another scholarship to Ormond College at Melbourne University again. So a brilliant person, moving ahead out of the state system by scholarships because of his brilliance. And then we've got Peter Doherty. Here's the laureate Professor Peter Doherty. That's a bit of an accolade. He was born in that time, and he's still alive today. And I saw him on a presentation recently talking about the coronavirus. He was born in Brisbane. He attended the veterinary school of the University of Queensland. Then he also went on and did a PhD, this time at Edinburgh University in Scotland. He's happily married to Penny and has 2 boys. And according to the Sydney Morning Herald article, he's still having sex occasionally at 77. Interesting fact. All right, Burnet, what were his achievements? He had so many achievements that it's hard to fit them on one screen. So I'll let you scroll through that. I'll move myself out of the way. And one of the big ones was this isolating the influenza virus. Now, we talk about the COVID virus at the moment. It only took them a couple of weeks to isolate it and reproduce it. But back when Burnet was working, there were breakthroughs to actually look at the influenza virus because they didn't have the technical means then, or they're just developing to be able to extract the virus and study it. His other one was he found a method of reproducing the influenza vaccines using eggs. And we still have eggs as one of the main ways of mass producing the flu vaccine each year. And you're often asked, do you have any allergy to eggs? Because the vaccine is grown in eggs. So yes, he had a lot more than that, but I couldn't list them all. And some of them are a bit too technical for a business studies teacher like me to know. I'm not an expert in medicine. But the influenza virus is one of his big ones. And his method of, All right. Doherty had a lot more too, but I couldn't fit them on. I just showed these ones. He got a Nobel Prize in association with a colleague for discovering how T cells kill virus-infected cells in mice. And then he developed that into a theory for human, or actually it wasn't a theory, it became quite a practical thing. Now, I put this quote here as another thing he achieved because it was how the immune system recognised both microbial invaders and its own body cells. So that's important in producing vaccines because Sometimes the vaccine produces a response, an over-response in your own immune system, which can cause more damage than the actual invasion of the outside body. Now, why I put that there is this person's on the telly all the time now. Anthony is the main person talking about the coronavirus, advising the president in the US, and the president's not always listening to him. All right, his leadership qualities as distinct from his leadership characteristics, but as you actually look into it, you find the qualities and the characteristics seem to overlap. So he was able to communicate well because he had a small team. They understood what he wanted of them, and he was able to articulate it and get that done. He was also a man of integrity. He was honest, hardworking, and he got fully involved with the team. He wasn't sitting in his office doing his thing and telling them to do the work. He was involved with them. So it was a real team approach. He also gave credit to others, was thus gracious. So he didn't accept all the praise for himself. He was also empathetic. He could understand how others felt. He was a people person. He was respected in the international community by medical scientists for his knowledge, his work, and his innovation. He was also able to learn new things quite regularly. And he provided new approaches in a creative and innovative way. And I especially already mentioned the use of the parts of the egg for mass producing vaccines, especially against influenza. Now, Doherty, the list is smaller, but he's still got the same characteristics. It might have been that I was getting lazy. So he was also empathetic. He understood how people felt. He had integrity, and he also gave praise to other people where other people did the work rather than him. And getting his Nobel Prize, he gave due credit to his teammate. There was a joint Nobel Prize because they both discovered the same thing with the T cells and killing the viruses. A couple of slides later, I got a long quote from him about Burnet. He gave this presentation about Burnet on what would have been Burnet's 100th birthday, but Burnet was dead by then. He's also an agile learner. That is, he learned readily and quickly. And he was also a superb communicator. And we'll find out later there's an institute named after him. And unless you can communicate with politicians and other scientists, you're not going to get an institute named after you. So now we're looking at characteristics. So, and some examples. You were supposed to do 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, it's close. I've done this all in an afternoon, put it together. So I'm just showing you that it is achievable in the time you've got. So when his mentor thought he would be better in just doing research, he was courageous enough to say, no, you're retiring, I want to be the director of the institute. And he moved over and became successful as the leader of the institute doing research. At the same time, he was also in charge of one of the medical programs at Melbourne Uni. So it shows he had quite an ability to do a lot of work in a lot of fields at one time. I've already mentioned his innovative method of reproducing viruses as eggs, which is a standard technique used today. He set goals and he achieved them. He wanted to have a world-class institution to study viruses, etc., and he did. And in the end, he also got an institute named after him, which we'll look at later. He was a leader in the sense that he worked with his team and led by example. He was knowledgeable in being a world expert in his field. He was proactive. He was always seeking positions of responsibility and using his drive to achieve outcomes. And he was loyal to those who worked with him and gained their admiration, trust, and respect. So that's a good leader. If the people following you respect you and admire you and trust you, then you've been a good leader. Doherty was similar in many ways. He was innovating and discovering how the T cells killed viruses in mice, and then made the move to that affect humans as well. He set goals and had a vision for a dedicated institution to progress research into immunology, and there's such an institute named after him in Victoria. His knowledge was world class. He was proactive and got things done. He was accountable and took full responsibility for his team and its progress. And he was also aware of his strengths, which were many, and any shortcomings were compensated for by the team that he chose and led. So they're two good leaders to have a look at. Why did I choose these two? Well, due to the field that they achieved in, and given the world pandemic at the moment, it seemed that they were a natural choice. One who paved the way, Burnet, and one who is still semi-active in the field, Doherty. Both were renowned Australians, and both associated with the University of Melbourne, which is my alma mater, the university I went to. I didn't go to medical school, I went to the commerce school, but still there's an association. Now, this is a quote that Doherty gave on the 100th anniversary of Burnet's. He's talking about the lineage. So he's giving credit that Burnet was down here and the lineage, like the line followed through. So he's riding on the shoulders of those who went before him, and he's giving due credit to those leaders, including Burnet. So scientific discoveries are not made in isolation. Innovation depends on resources, both intellectual and physical. A primary requirement is the development and maintenance of the appropriate institutions. Such structures do not emerge by chance, but arise from opportunity, political will, and the continued efforts and commitment of many people over long periods. Suitable buildings, laboratories, and state-of-the-art equipment are obviously necessary, but hardware alone is of little value in the absence of a vibrant research culture. The key characteristic of the latter are intellectual ferment, open debate, and a body of wisdom and knowledge about the particular subject area. So all of that is giving credit to Burnet, acknowledging him as a leader and a pathfinder and an innovator, and Doherty was one of those himself. So the similarities. They were both professors at Melbourne Uni. They both won a Nobel Prize. They both had overseas posting as part of their career, both including in America. Burnet was actually offered a professorship at Harvard University. You don't get any more prestigious than that. But he said he wanted to go back to Melbourne and work in the institution there on research. And Doherty, I think, is still associated with St. Jude's Research Hospital in America and goes there, or he used to go there for 3 months of the year. They both preferred research to innovation, to administration. They didn't want to be managers. They wanted to be leaders and involved, getting their hands dirty in what they did. One was an virologist, study virus. One was an immunologist, how to survive viruses. So there was a very close similarity there. Both won multiple awards and honours. One had a Scottish heritage, one had an Irish heritage, but they were both born in Australia, but they have a UK background there. The Burnet Institute of Medical Research is named after Burnet, and the Peter Doherty Institute is also named after him. So there's some similarities. And I did have biographies. They're all web pages. And the little thing didn't pop up at the bottom, which is supposed to say down here that this is not how you'd use a university reference. Even when you do a web page reference, you should say the day you actually accessed that website, who wrote the web page, and other bits and pieces. But I've just been lazy and put the link there, and that's all you would need to do using web pages. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing, end the message, and it will save. Goodbye. Signing off. Done.